With grief, I never really thought I would go through grief because I was preparing for this for almost 5 years. I was getting stronger. I had to be strong. I have 2 teenage kids, and I was getting stronger and stronger for that. And I didn't show it to my wife or to my kids or people around because I felt I had to be the rock. And people were just amazed how I did it as such, because I was very much into my wife and everything was fine. It was only after this numbness dissipated that I started feeling grief.
Over the years, many eminent scholars and practitioners have tried to find ways to describe the grief process. All of these illustrate our need to try to put the experience into some kind of a meaningful framework or context. However, as helpful as all of these theoretical systems can be, they're not without their critics, who quite rightly point out that grief is not orderly and predictable. You can't fit people's experience into a neat, tidy little box. In fact, most people agree that everyone experiences grief in their own unique way, influenced by many factors.
There were so many factors that made my loss unique. First of all, my wife died suddenly at a relatively young age. It was unexpected, so it came as a shock to us all. It took some getting used to. But then there were other considerations. I'm male, and an English male at that. There are so many stereotypes that say that men shouldn't cry and that we have to be strong. But that didn't work, because I found myself emotional and crying a lot. It was as if I could hear my father's voice saying, "Come on, Michael, pull yourself together, just get on with it." My dad's been dead 20 years now, more than that. But his influence still seems to carry a lot of weight. I felt like I was letting him down, letting myself down, letting my heritage down, letting everybody down.
And so our grief guideline is, there is no one neat, orderly way to describe the grief process. Margaret Mead once made this insightful comment on our culture. When someone is born, we rejoice. When someone is married, we celebrate. But when someone dies, we pretend that nothing has happened. Often, shortly after a death, no one wants to talk about it or mention it. But the grieving person wants to talk because they don't want their loved one to be forgotten. One of the most important insights into grief is to realize that it is not a sickness or a disease. It's not a mental health disorder. Grief is a normal human response to any significant loss. People sometimes perceive it as a problem that needs to be fixed. They tell us that we need to pull ourselves together, not to be emotional or allow ourselves to cry. They might even suggest that something is wrong and that what we're experiencing is abnormal or pathological. I believe we need to take another and perhaps a closer look. After the tragedies of 9/11, Queen Elizabeth sent a message to the people of New York City in which she said this: "Grief is the price we pay for love." You know, I think that's very true and very profound. Grief is the cost of caring. So our next grief guideline is, grief is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign you cared.
Grieving is something that...
As grieving, they regard it as a weakness or as an inability to cope. After all, people say, "What's wrong with you? Pull yourself together. Life must go on. You mustn't cry." Or the ultimate guilt trip: your loved one wouldn't want you to cry. Well, I'd like to state here and now that I'm leaving specific instructions for my family and my friends when I die, I want someone to cry. I mean, wouldn't we all want to think that after we're gone, someone would miss us enough to shed a tear? I'd like to think that my life has been significant enough that my loved ones won't get over it in 3 months. Of course, I want them to go on and make the most of life, but I would like to be remembered, and I would like to be missed at significant times. Wouldn't you? Tears are not a sign of weakness. They're a sign that you cared. I feel that in our modern culture that we need to validate grief and say that it's not an abnormal or pathological state, but rather it's a natural reaction to a significant loss. We need to give people and ourselves permission to grieve. But when we think we aren't doing it right, or when others suggest that our reactions are atypical, or that we're losing our minds or going crazy, we try to fight the process rather than recognizing that it is a natural reaction. Oh, you've caught me. One of my passions in life is a love of chocolate. And these nut clusters are one of my favorites. You know, it's interesting. After a lifetime of research on these things, I've noticed something very significant. Every nut cluster is unique. Think about it. Every nut cluster is made of the same basic ingredients. They all start with a hazelnut at the center, surrounded by that wonderful whipped hazelnut chocolate cream, encased in a wafer biscuit, smothered with milk chocolate, sprinkled with nuts. And yet, although they all have the same basic ingredients, everyone is just a little bit different. Some of them are round, some have a few holes here and there, some have an extra blob of chocolate on top, some have a few more nuts on one side than on the other. Same basic ingredients, and yet everyone different. Grief is like a nut cluster. We could spend a lot of time listing the many ingredients of grief, and yet everyone has their own unique cluster of emotions. Everyone experiences grief in their own way. Some people cry, some people don't. Some people get through grief relatively quickly, others take much longer. Some people experience certain emotions, other people experience completely different reactions. There's no universal right or wrong way to grieve. Everyone's different. And everyone should have permission to grieve in a way that's right for them. Our grief guideline, if you understand the why, the how takes care of itself. Every loss is difficult, but every loss is different. Sometimes people ask me, what's the worst kind of loss? Is it worse to lose a child, or is it worse to lose a spouse? Is it worse to lose someone suddenly and unexpectedly, or is it worse to lose someone after a long, lingering illness? I've come to believe that the worst kind of loss is yours. Because to you, it feels like the worst thing that could possibly have happened. I hate cliches. And one of the worst cliches is when people say, well, others have it worse.
Someone came up to me the other day and said, others have it worse. I didn't say it, but you know what I was thinking? Who cares? I'm sorry for someone else's loss, but I feel like this is the worst thing that could happen to me. Frankly, I don't have the energy to feel sorry for anyone else but me. Maybe that sounds selfish, but that's the way it is.
Heather is right. It's hard to think about anyone else or their loss right now. To you, this feels like the worst thing that could have happened at the worst possible time. There's no such thing as more or less difficult. It's just different. Every loss is different, and every person's reaction is going to be unique. Men grieve differently from women. It's part of our conditioning and gender stereotypes. Our grief reactions are often connected to what we saw modeled by our parents and our grandparents. People from different cultures and faiths grieve differently. It's different to lose someone suddenly than it is to lose someone after a long illness. Not more or less difficult, just different. And perhaps most importantly, it's intimately connected to the relationship that we've lost. Not just the legal definition of the relationship, but what that person brought to my life and what I brought to their life. Often what we grieve is the relationship shared. Or in some cases where the relationship was complicated, we grieve what we had hoped the relationship would be. We have many things in common, and yet everyone is unique. So our signpost, there is no such thing as more or less difficult. It is just different.